Hello and welcome to the Gamers Tavern, episode number 46. We've got a great one for you with author Elizabeth Moon talking about her series, The Deed of Paksenarrion. And this is an amazing series that Ross and I are both big fans of. And we're also joined by the Gamers Tavern social media coordinator, Lauren Raber, who was in the process of reading the books. And she has since finished them and is totally in love. Will not stop talking about it. But I'm going to warn you right now, we talk about all 3 books in the Deed of Paksenarrion series, and we get pretty spoilerific. So if you haven't had a chance to check this out now, go ahead, feel free, pause this episode, go to audibletrial.com/Gamers Tavern, where you can get the first book, Sheep Farmer's Daughter, for free by signing up for the free trial through there. Or if you'd rather get everything all at once, or if you're more of a Kindle or even paper person, go to our affiliate links in the show notes where you can click, go straight to her books as well as all of her science fiction books as well, and buy them all, read them all, come back and listen to us talk with Elizabeth Moon, where she sheds a lot of light on the process of writing these books and a lot of the things that even we didn't know. And Ross has been a fan of this series for a long time. But yeah, we fanboy out a lot with this. So go ahead and grab a drink from the bar and take a seat at the table in the corner, and we'll be right back after this word from our sponsor. Need more dice? Heck yeah, who doesn't? How would you like to pay a fraction of the cost that you would typically spend at the normal game store? In fact, you can grab 105 dice for 15 complete 7-dice set for under $24. Yeah, check it out at easyrollerdice.com and enter the code GAMER at checkout and immediately get an extra 10% off your purchase, and shipping is always free. Go to easyrollerdice.com now and remember to enter the code GAMER at checkout. We'll see you there.
The Gamers Tavern podcast is sponsored by Pinnacle Entertainment Group's Savage Worlds game, featuring Deadlands, 50 Fathoms, East Texas University, Weird Wars, and dozens of fantastic licensees. Savage Worlds is fast, furious, and fun. Hello and welcome to the Gamers Tavern podcast. I'm your host, Ross Watson.
And I'm Daryl Mott Jr.
And I'm Lauren Raber.
Hi, Lauren. Welcome to the show. She is kind of joining us as an extra guest tonight.
Yes, and I'm extremely excited. I'm usually just see me on the back end doing all the social media. I'm the Facebook lady.
So you're actually more like an extra host, is what I should say. So yes, absolutely. And tonight we have one of my favorite authors of all time joining us as a guest. Please welcome Miss Elizabeth Moon.
Hi there.
Welcome
Nice to be here.
Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
I am very glad to be here.
Thank you. So I'm sure you've probably never heard us before. So just so you know what's going on, the Gamers Tavern podcast, we are a podcast that primarily focuses on tabletop role-playing games with the occasional foray into things like video games and novels. And tonight we're kind of trying something a little different. Tonight we're doing something we're kind of calling, at least between Daryl and myself, a book club episode.
Yeah,
okay.
we're still hammering out the branding on that one.
So the book club episodes, we're going to try and focus, due to our listenership, we're going to try and focus on books that have a connection to tabletop gaming. And at least if the stories I've heard are true, the book we're going to be covering tonight does in fact have such a tie. The book we're talking about tonight is really an omnibus edition of 3 separate books. And the omnibus edition's title, and at least the one I've heard most people describe the series as, is called The Deed of Paksenarrion. Is that pretty much what everybody calls it when they? I assume when people, they don't really get into the individuals, they talk mostly about the trilogy. Is that right?
That's true now, certainly.
Okay. Well, that's how I discovered it in 1992 was as the omnibus. But before we get into the main topic, we're going to do a thing where we'd like to tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and where they might know you from in the context of a gaming character sheet. Can you do that for us, Elizabeth?
I'll try if you'll remind me of some of the things I need to know.
No problem. Well, I imagine, you'd probably describe yourself as a level 20 author.
I think so, yes.
All right, fantastic. For the listeners, can you tell us about what you are best known for as an author?
Probably the Paksenarrion books, epic fantasy, somewhat for military science fiction, and somewhat for pure silliness, like in the Bronze Bra books, the Chicks and Chainmail books.
Oh, the Esther Friesner is the editor of those, I believe.
Yes, she is.
Yes, those are great. But I'm a big fan of Esther as well, and I've read most of the Chicks and Chainmail as well. Gotta love those Larry Elmore covers on those.
Oh, absolutely.
Of course, good connection to tabletop there with Larry as well.
Yes.
All right. So, are you an elf?
Possibly. I think my ancestry might be mysterious.
That is the most interesting answer I think we've ever had to that question. All right, brilliant. And also, you in your real life gaming character sheet, you actually have proficiency with blades, particularly fencing. Is that right?
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
That started probably about 1998. No, it was earlier than that, 1996, I think. I met some SCA people at a convention in Austin at ArmadilloCon, and they said, "You write well about this sort of thing. Would you like to learn to actually fence?" And I said, "Yes, of course. I've been wanting to for years." So they took me over to their house one evening, and I picked up an actual rapier, and there began the fencing lessons.
Fantastic. Austin, I just moved away from there, unfortunately. I lived there for about 3 years, and it is exactly that kind of place where you'll find people fencing in the park on a warm summer day. So fantastic. And you've been fencing ever since. You're actually a captain of a team, is that right?
Yes, the Sinfua Musketeers. We're kind of getting old and creaky, and we don't all make it to conventions enough anymore, but we definitely had a lot of fun.
Now, SIFWA is an acronym for...
Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America.
Aha. Okay. Now, the next thing we were going to get into is we're going to talk about what kind of games we've been playing lately. And I think fencing probably counts for you, unless you want to tell us about any other games that you found interesting that you've been playing lately.
I haven't been playing games lately. I've been writing books lately.
There's a lot of them.
There's kind of a time problem there.
Yeah.
When you're writing the way I write, you don't have time for game playing. You don't have time to get a group together. And I've actually found that I liked the writing more than the game playing, so please don't kill me for that.
Oh, no. I mean, everybody's got the thing that they do, and you are an excellent writer, so there's no denying that.
I'm not going to name names, but there's a couple of fantasy authors out there I wish would spend a little more time writing and a little less time playing games.
Let's not get into that.
I think I have a suspicion, but I will be polite and stay far away from it.
Probably the best thing. All right, so I'm going to jump to Lauren. Lauren, what have you been playing lately?
We've been doing a lot of board type games lately here. We've been playing
We played Munchkin.
Munchkin Panic. I haven't laughed that hard in a while, but it wasn't nearly as fun as our 2-player Cards Against Humanity game that lasted till 2:00 in the morning on Sunday morning. So,
wow.
And for those wondering, the 2-player variant on Cards Against Humanity is where you basically draw a random card and see if the card you picked can beat the card that was random from the deck. But I've got my Cards Against Humanity deck so slimmed down to just the best cards. It beat our asses every time.
So Cards Against Humanity and Munchkin.
Munchkin Panic, Starflux, and Pandemic, actually.
Oh, yeah.
That was kind of an intense
we should review
game.
That someday.
Yes, we
lost.
totally should.
We got overwhelmed. See, what else have we played lately? Oh, I started going through my Magic the Gathering cards again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I haven't played Magic in about 5 or 6 years now, I think. And I'm something I can't afford right now, but it's very tempting.
Thankfully, she's doing it when I'm at work, apparently, because I haven't seen them, and I don't want to get sucked back in. It's like Michael Corleone.
So,
I'm finally out.
Daryl, what have you been playing lately? Or does that pretty much cover you as well?
That pretty much covers me as well.
Okay. As for myself, I've been, of course, playing more Sentinels of the Multiverse. There's a new expansion out for the iPad, which new characters and new villains, and oh my god, it's amazing. And then lastly, I have played in Sean Fannon's new thing where he's got a riff on Icons, the Assembled Edition, which is a very interesting game system. I really like the rules light approach. I really like the semi-fateness of it. It's kind of very much like Fate, but it's cool with superheroes, and we did some really fun stuff with that. We're going to keep playing that some more here in town. And of course, this weekend is Genghis Khan here in Aurora, Colorado, which is going to be 4 days of awesome gaming. But let's jump over that, and let's jump into the main topic. Let's talk about, well, before we jump into Dita Paksenarrion specifically, I want to mention and call out Elizabeth Moon's other works, because people who like Dita Paksenarrion should definitely check out the Harris Serrano series and Vada's War, which is just some fantastic military sci-fi. Elizabeth, those are how long ago did you write those? I think there's probably like 10 years.
Let's see. The the Serrano books started in the early 90s, I would say, and ran through most of that decade. The last one, I think, came out in 1999. And then the Vada's War books started early in this millennium.
Right.
I'm trying to remember exactly when. I think the first one may have been 2004 or 2005. And then there were 5 of them. Then I went back to Paksenarrion's world and did the 5 of those.
Right. And I just want to briefly mention the Harris Serrano and Vada's War, because they all take place in the same universe, which is really cool. The Familius Regnant?
Familius Regnant is one universe, and Vada's War takes place in another.
Then I was mistaken. So the Harris Serrano books are in a particular universe called the Familius Regnant, which is, if you are a military sci-fi lover or a horse riding lover, those are excellent books because they cover a lot of both of those topics. And then Vada's War is simply just some of the best military sci-fi I've ever read. So let's just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Oh my God. We could probably do a whole show on Vada's War specifically, or even Harris Serrano. But let's get to the focus, which is Dita Paksenarrion. Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about the character of Paksenarrion.
Paksenarrion is a paladin in a fantasy world, and she is a paladin the way I thought of paladins. And you're right that she has her roots in my antipathy for the paladins in D&D.
I've always heard that story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a friend who had a son about, 10 or 11 years old, I think, at the time, who wanted to play D&D, but his father was unwilling to play with him. And he couldn't find other kids in this town that wanted to play. So he talked to my husband, and my husband agreed to DM for him. The next thing we knew, we had, I think, 5 altogether young boys playing at our house with my husband as the DM, and 2 of the parents who didn't want to drive all the way back to the town they lived in joined in with him. And at first I was sitting on the couch trying to write the story I was trying to write and listening to this. And being predominantly a writer and not a gamer, I was critiquing the stories.
Right.
Which, of course, was annoying to the players. They didn't particularly like that. And finally, they said, if you're going to talk about it, you have to do it.
Uh-oh.
Now, I had played some board games with my husband before, some war games. And, again, found myself fretting about how it was set up. Because I have a history degree, and so I would look at it and say, yeah. You ought to be able to go over here. You ought to be able to do thus. That's more historically correct.
I gotta say, the polearms especially must have just driven you insane.
I have a story about polearms a little later.
Oh, boy.
But I did start playing with them. And one of the things that had annoyed me, I read all the books, all the directions, all the rules, everything. One of the things that annoyed me was the assumption that to be a good person, you had to be fairly stupid. You had to do stupid things in order to be considered good, because you were that kind of rigid good that reminds me of certain people in real life, but they aren't paladins to me. So I made my character start out as level 1 and have to learn things and make mistakes. And I was enjoying this until the point when, for other reasons, families moved, stuff happened, the group kind of fragmented, and then it wasn't as much fun, and I thought, one of the group, the original boy, was moved all the way out to Utah with his family.
Wow.
And I knew he was very unhappy about the move. Wasn't sure he would ever get to play D&D again. Miserable. So I thought I will write him a short story that connects to what we've been playing. You know how long a short story can be?
About
that long.
12 books?
Yes, something like that.
I've seen a trilogy in 5 parts, so.
Yeah, it grew.
Wow,
and
that's amazing.
It went way, way away from anything that we had played because my husband had been the DM. Mm-hmm. He had been designing all of the action, and he did a very good job, by the way. He's an excellent DM. But once I got hold of it, of course, once the writer gets hold of it, everything changes. Mm-hmm. So I was able to take it and go a long way. The original scene, the first scene that was in the story, never got into the book. In fact, about a chapter and a half never got into the book.
Well, now I'm really curious to know what was in that chapter and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let's see. There was Pax walking into a tavern, and somebody said, "What's your name, yellow hair?" She said, "Paksenarrion Dorthan's daughter of 3 furs."
Nice.
That was the first time I knew what her last name was. The first time I knew she came from 3 furs. And she never was in that tavern in the book. She also never went, let's see, somewhere in there when I was writing it, there was something that was too much like the game and not enough like what she really did. That was the part of the chapter I had to take out.
Well, I'm sure, the books are the best that they can be because they are just amazing. So I don't want to critique anything at all, but it's awesome to hear about these sort of proto stories before the bits that kind of got put on the cutting room floor. You know what I mean? It's really interesting to see behind the scenes a little bit.
It is about 30% shorter, believe it or not, than it was when it started. I didn't know how to write a novel. I had never really finished short stories. I'm not a natural short fiction writer. I'm a natural long form writer. But I didn't know that until I had finished this whole monster thing. So there was a lot that had to be thrown out.
Well, again, I just want to say, this is Deed to Paksenarrion is one of the most important books, I think, that I read as a young reader. I picked it up in 92 when I just graduated high school, and it is just brilliant storytelling. It's fantastic. And I'm not alone in this. I mean, I want to point out that if you go to Amazon.com and look it up, there's 365 reviews of this book. 284 of them are 5 out of 5 stars.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Just to be clear, we're talking about a book that won the award for the Baltimore. Let me see here. I'm trying to get this. The Compton Crook Award for a first novel.
Yeah, you should have seen me when they called and told me about it. I was sort of going all screechy and jumping up and down and bouncing and going, oh my God, all of that.
Well, just to talk really quickly about Paksenarrion and specifically like the roles of women in the Deed of Paksenarrion, the trilogy and beyond. I think the roles of women in the novels are all really well developed. Women are leaders. They're warriors. They're heads of state. I mean, the Marshal General of Gerd is essentially a head of state.
Yep.
But beyond their representation, their gender is not ignored either.
No. What I wanted to do with women in this world was have realistic women who had some opportunities that they don't in other fantasy worlds, because I felt that they could do that. Because I had a military background, right. I was interested in what would a female military mind be like? How would a woman commander function? I mean, I had been a junior commander. I had some knowledge of this. And I knew that in the past, in history, there were women who had actually fought in non-industrial type combat, mostly in hiding, mostly concealed. But there was a case in the 13th century, which is mentioned in Tuchman's Distant Mirror, where the wife of a nobleman had to defend the castle, her husband's castle. He was away. And she put on armor and led her troops out on horseback. Now, what this tells you is, because armor in those days had to be made for each individual, had to be fitted. it tells you that noble women, some of them at least, trained, knew how to wear the armor, had armor to wear, knew how to ride a war horse, had a war horse they could ride with a saddle that fit them as well as the horse.
Right. This is no casual thing, right?
No casual thing. And her troops followed her, and they routed the enemy.
Right. And, I mean, this is, of course, there's the more classic examples of Joan of Arc and Boudica. But it's really, I think it's wonderful how it comes across in the Pax novels. I think you hit the target you were aiming for. Now, Daryl, you have something you wanted to say about Paksenarrion, right?
Yeah, there's one thing that there's a lot to love about the character, but one thing I wanted to point out is, as far as I'm aware, it's one of the few characters where not only is Paksenarrion kind of in her sexual preference, she is asexual in that she doesn't show any interest in romantic or sexual relationships for the most part, but it's not any sort of thing about it. It's actually addressed, it's talked about, and that's one of the few times I can remember seeing that in any sort of genre fiction. So there's always the tacked on love story to every single big epic thing.
And Pax has just got bigger fish to fry, basically.
Yeah. That's one of the things that one of my editors at some point said, you cannot have all of your characters asexual. You've got to start putting some sex in your books. And I thought, well, okay, because I find it interesting that there are people who are functionally asexual who find other things more interesting.
Yes.
Other things more compelling at the moment. And it was fun to write her in that way. While I did have other characters who were sexual, that had sexual preferences.
Now, in the later books, I think this is kind of transferred to Arcolin. I'm sorry, I'm getting it wrong. It's the mage knight. I may have that name incorrect.
Oh, Doran?
Doran, yes, it's transferred to Doran, I believe, in the later books.
Doran's a little different. Doran's asexuality may be related to the childhood trauma she had. I didn't want that for Pax because I think there are people who are not particularly sexually active, and it has nothing to do with trauma. But in the case of Doran, much of her character was shaped by the absolutely hideous childhood she had.
And this is a thing that I want to point out, is I think I love the fact that your characters all seem real in a lot of ways to me. And that has to do with the fact that they have families that feel real. Right? They weren't born to, wealthy doctors who gave them everything that they wanted, like other characters I could name. They're born into families that have feuds and spats and sometimes, trauma and horrific, things that happen. They're born into families that feel like real families.
I was hoping for that, yes.
I love, that's something I point out all the time when I talk about Elizabeth Moon's characters, is I think they always feel like they have like a real family and real relationships and, flaws and things like that. But before, just to keep the focus a little bit on Pax, Lauren, you've read this book recently.
I just started reading it yesterday, actually, and it has me completely sucked in.
Yeah, she is almost done with the first book, and I've warned her she's getting spoiled to hell and back.
Yeah, there's spoiled. So for any listeners who have not read Paksenarrion, we're going to be spoiling the hell out of stuff tonight. So
yeah, I look forward to the spoilers, and that way, and hopefully everything that we're talking about today will just help bring things even more to life in my crazy imagination. So.
Now, what's your opinion of Paksenarrion, Lori, from the first book?
So far, like I said, it has me completely hooked. I love the strong female character and the fact that she actually has doubts, and she overcomes those doubts, saying, "I wanted this, I will finish this," and that is very empowering to anybody, especially women.
Well, she works really hard. Paksenarrion does. She works hard for pretty much everything she gets, although there are times when she kind of does have something given to her, but that doesn't really work out so well.
Yeah. First spoiler, Lauren. Pretty much the only time I can remember where something was kind of handed to Paksenarrion where she didn't earn it was when she was doing the training, sorry, it's been a couple months.
The Marshal General of Gerd.
Yeah. The Marshal General basically said, we're going to move you up to Paladin training, even though you haven't met all the requirements we normally have, because we need to hurry up and get Paladins out there. And so that was kind of handed to her, and it kind of blew up in everybody's face.
Well,
yes.
you could make the argument that the Ring of Animal Control that she gets from the adventure with the elf is also something that's given to her that does not go well.
Yeah, that one didn't end up that well.
Which, by the way, we'll get into that in a second, because that's one of the best gaming call-outs I think I've ever seen, is the Ring of Animal Control. I'm so into that.
That was an absolute great moment. I think we should actually talk about that one a little bit later
when
we start breaking down the story. But
do you want to jump into that specific thing then?
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump into that one specifically.
All right, we're gonna break from the script a little bit, Elizabeth.
But that moment was great, and I had completely forgotten about it until Ross just mentioned it right now. I was reading through the novels today, but I didn't get that far into it. But at some point in time, there's this warhorse that no one can tame, but she uses a ring of animal control and forces it to tame for her, and it kind of teaches her a lesson where it backfires on her, and you shouldn't lean on things that you don't fully understand.
It's an interesting approach to looking at what in any other story would be a cool magical item, right? And Pax learns a valuable lesson from it, and in fact, basically resolves never to use it again because of the way it made her feel, which I thought that was really interesting. You don't really see that in books where some guy, gets the magic sword, or he gets, Excalibur, or whatever, whatever the particular item needs to be. It's usually like, wow, check out this awesome thing, right? And
Bilbo's running around shoving the One Ring on his finger all over the place in The Hobbit.
Maybe not Bilbo. Okay, Bilbo.
That ended up coming back later on, but in The Hobbit, no, he's just throwing that ring on anytime he feels like it.
I would argue actually The Hobbit is, taking that magic item thing a little more seriously.
That was an addiction to power.
Yeah.
But specifically the Ring of Animal Control was, it was a neat way. It made me, it definitely changed the way I looked at magic items in gaming. Even when I'm playing a role-playing game character and I find something cool, it made me wonder about that a little bit, because, I thought that was a wonderful scene. One of the more memorable scenes, of which there are many.
I would say it's also a way to show the danger of secret power, of wanting to keep your power secret, because she did that initially with the horse. She had felt guilty after she killed the snow leopard, or after Paksenarrion killed the snow leopard. But when she used it with the horse, she's deliberately hiding it. And then she realizes that in addition to it not being fair and not showing her true training ability, if she had any, it's a dangerous thing to keep the source of your power secret.
And the way Simeon encourages her to use it is very, that's where I see a lot of typical gamers going, yeah, come on, it's just a ring, use it.
Well, it wasn't just that; it was that the whole scene with him, and just how much he kept twisting logic to basically absolve himself of any guilt of anything. I didn't do anything wrong. That was all your fault. If you feel guilty about killing that animal, you shouldn't have done it. But you told me to do it, so you shouldn't have done it anyway.
Yeah.
Now, he was taking advantage of a person who was very naive.
Mm-hmm.
She thinks she's experienced at that point, but she's been living in this bubble of the mercenary company, where other people decide what the morals are, what the ethics are. And once she's out on her own, she's still a very young person and a very inexperienced person.
I'm going to skip ahead a little bit too, Daryl, because Elizabeth said something I thought that was really interesting to me, and this is something I wanted to bring up later, is when Paksenarrion breaks off on her own. I felt like, to me, Elizabeth, this is Paksenarrion going on a journey to sort of search for meaning, because she was disenchanted after the Siniavos War, disenchanted with the life of the mercenary, because she felt like the fighting didn't have meaning. It had become meaningless.
Pretty much, yes. She was definitely searching for a different way to use her strengths.
Yeah, with a purpose, a greater purpose. Is this something that maybe came out of your own military experience? I mean, I know I've had times when as a veteran, I was in the Army for 8 years. There were times in the Army that I felt that I wanted and desired a higher purpose for my service,
I don't think it came directly out of my service. It came probably out of reading a lot of military history and a lot of military memoirs. Because more than one soldier has said, I was fine with the war up until here. It was a war of defense or whatever, it was a noble cause. And then all of a sudden, we were torturing prisoners and being the bad guys.
Yeah. So, which of course has a much more interesting meaning in the modern era.
Yeah.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, lest this show become something much more different than we originally intended.
Yeah, let's get back to the story.
Let's talk about the book. But we could go on about that. This is kind of all in the service of a point that I thought was really important to bring up, and that's world building. The Deed of Paksenarrion creates a very compelling and interesting world. And we've talked about world building here on the show before, because there's a lot of guys out there who are, DMs, and they want to run a really cool game and they want to set it in a really cool world. And the thing that we always kind of stress is that a good way to start with world building is to start with characters and start with conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the world of Paksenarrion definitely has those two things in spades. But it's some of the details, I think, that even bring it more to life, which is the codes of law and the religions and the strong identity and tone of all the nations that you find.
That was deliberate and probably out of my history degree.
No doubt.
In fact, if I could throw this in here, if we have a little space of time.
Sure.
One of the things I wanted to do was create the human groups as distinct identities and cultures, and then also the non-human races as distinct identities and cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, I have to brag on one of my professors at Rice, Dr. Lear, who wrote a book called Treason in Roman and Germanic Law. Very solid history, researched, etc. But treason in Roman and Germanic law is what gave me the difference between the gnomes and the dwarves. It's all based on the character traits and the cultural traits that he pointed out in that particular instance.
We don't actually see very much of the dwarves in
No. You see them only really in Divided Allegiance.
Yeah.
The dwarf that goes out to Colombia with them.
That's right. That's pretty much the only example. For the most part, it's the gnomes and the elves. I think the elves also have a very interesting
They're also the dwarves at the when she was training too. That she was the one who made. She was the only one who made overtures to try to make friends with them, I believe.
That's true.
But we didn't see too much of them. They were kind of in the background characters in a way to add a little flavor to it. It seemed like, but at the same time, it was still introducing those traits, and it was dwarves that were definitely fit the archetype of what we think of as fantasy race dwarves, but these weren't Tolkien's dwarves. These weren't any of the dwarves from D&D. It was something that was completely unique.
Well, they were comfortably familiar but they were also interestingly unique.
They're part of the deep history that I wasn't using all of at the time. But if you, at this point, go back and look at a story that was in, which book was it in? Anyway, the story is called Judgment, and it's about what happened to the dwarves when they failed to live up to their duty to a dragon.
Oh. Well, the dragons, of course, are a big deal in the more recent books.
Yes, they didn't show up at all except as part of the legends in the older books, but that was deliberate. And
Elizabeth, please forgive us for, dropping some of these details and being wrong about them.
That's okay.
I think I've read the Deed of Paksenarrion at least 4 times, but as you get older, the things you think are true, it turns out to not be true. I have all kinds of reference pages open in front of me, and even then I'm still getting some of the names wrong, so I apologize for that in advance.
Don't apologize. I got a lot of things wrong when I started the new group because I had lost my reference notebooks.
Ooh.
Oh, really?
I'm still working on trying to put names to faces, and I've had to go back in the book and reread about certain character descriptions to make sure that I was thinking about the correct person. So
yeah, well, I made one of the mistakes I made in the first books because I didn't know any better was I had the clever idea of having root names in each nation that had little differences in their suffixes or their prefixes, but they were basically similar. That is total hell for copy editors. You have Celis, Celly, Celits. Ugh, how can they tell which one is right? How can they tell if the continuity is right? How can I tell if the continuity is right?
Yeah.
And like I said, for me trying to figure out, okay, who is she talking about again?
Yeah. Sympathies. I screwed up on that.
It's still a good book.
Yeah, one of the good things about the 21st century and our digital age is there are things fans will go nuts and create big Wikipedia pages and fan pages, and you actually have a really amazing page that you run, Ms. Moon, that is really great. The only downside to those is if you're not careful, you can easily run into spoilers, which I did the first time I was reading through A Song of Ice and Fire. So yeah, I accidentally ran into. That's okay. What now? Okay, that's that guy. Let me click again. Okay, he's in this one. He's get killed in the next book. Oh, damn it! But thankfully, your page is actually really well written. So if anyone's reading through the books and for the first time and they're having trouble keeping straight at the characters, like Lauren is, go to Elizabeth's website and her page breaks down all the characters, all the nations, everything else, and it's really, really light on spoilers, so you won't get those. Oh crap, that character's dead. Oh well.
And what's the name of her website?
PaxWorld.com.
Thank you.
PaxWorld.com. And there's also a group of fans for this, is there not?
Yes, there's a blog associated with it, and there's a group of fans associated with the blog.
Aha. So there you go.
people are welcome to come and join in the conversations that we have. Occasionally there are contests. I've got one that I need to finish doing the randomization judging on.
So there's a fan group for the blog, for the fan group for the books. That's like Paxception right there.
I want to talk about some of the really powerful scenes in these books, because when I think back, I think, you can name a book and I can tell you like the things that I can remember as the most impactful scenes. And I think, obviously we need to start with Sheep Farmer's Daughter. So for me, one of the biggest comes early on. It comes with Pax's training, and she has an incident with a fellow trainee named Corin, which ends up putting her on trial for her life. Yes. Yeah. Corin is one of those villains that just makes your blood boil. Some villains are just assholes, and that guy, wow. Yeah.
For the record, I am curious. I've only read the first three, the D books, so I'm kind of curious. Does he show up again in any of the novels, and does he get tortured some more? Please.
He shows up again.
Yes, he does.
Okay.
Anything more than that would be a spoiler, so you have to go read the rest of them.
Okay.
I remember when we ran into him again, and it was satisfying.
Okay. It's satisfying. Works for me. Because I just want to see him suffer some more.
Well, that's the mark of a good villain, in my opinion. It's someone you have a really strong emotional reaction to. And Corin is definitely that guy. I mean, I think Elizabeth and I both had some, similar service related experiences, because I've seen that guy in the Army as well. Yep. Yeah.
I've seen that guy in The Office. So it's not a military only thing, although there probably is. It's probably more likely in the military because of just the way things are structured, but It's not a problem just in the office. But yeah, that guy.
But we have other characters that we learn of in this book as well. We learn of Arcolin and Stammel, which are some really great examples of officers and non-commissioned officers, and Duke Phelan, who is the patron of the mercenary company that she joins. And I always thought it was really interesting. Again, this kind of going back to the idea of Paksenarrion as an asexual character, but there was always that. I like the way that Elizabeth sort of led us down the path towards, well, she looks just like his dead wife, right? And in many other books, we know exactly where that path would be leading. It would be leading to a romance, but it doesn't. It actually it's important, and it informs a lot of her relationship with the Duke. But it doesn't actually go that way. It becomes, I found it intriguing because it changed the rules on that.
Yeah.
He would not have had any relationship with her other than Commander Soldier. He's more than 20 years older than she is, and he's still really connected to Tamarion.
Yes, but I think anybody who's read the book had said that there was at least some interest there.
Yes. Yeah. But it was the interest almost more as if she were the daughter that he had lost. Because remember that his daughter and son were also killed.
That's right.
So I think he looks upon her as not a replacement for his daughter, but in a more fatherly, more mentor-like.
More like a surrogate daughter.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's certainly possible that I got a different read out of that, but I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing.
No,
because again,
readers all contribute to the book as they read it. I mean, you're part of it as you read it. You make up exactly how the characters look to you. You make up exactly what they sound like to you, and that's that's a very good thing. We should leave room in the story for the reader to participate. So that I think one thing and you think another is not bad unless you think that they were sneaking off in the bushes together.
No, I well, certainly that definitely did not happen. And we were talking about why that didn't happen. There's a number of reasons, but amongst them is that she just is really interested in that kind of thing.
Now, I don't have any military experience personally, but there was one thing that seemed to happen during the scenes early on when she's with the Duke's company, and I kind of wanted to ask both of you who have military experience if this is something that's real or something I read into it, and maybe I'm getting very similar to that isn't there, but one of the things that I noticed is that Pax's first bond wasn't with anyone else. It was with her basically drill sergeant, her training master.
Yes.
And then it moved on, and as she started moving up the ranks, that's when she started having more interaction with the officers and the Duke himself, and that's when that relationship started happening. Before then, it was just a pure loyalty to someone I've seen once, and then it comes into an actual personal relationship.
That's pretty much how it goes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is, another, you brought up the right word, verisimilitude. It adds to that idea that the military feels real. And of course, the other really impactful scene for me is the whole Sinyava's War arc, where Pax kind of discovers her potential, but also gets to see the dark side of war. Gets to see, there's a lot of things that go wrong in Sinyava's War, and it makes it where it's obviously not war is not a glorious thing. It is a sometimes necessary thing, but it is an ugly and brutal in many ways.
It's a necessary evil. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Maybe
Clint Black would love that.
Yeah. But one thing I liked about that was, after they go and retake the keep pretty much, and then they start chasing him, it feels like there's something that's been going viral that's tabletop gaming related, where it's about the most frustrating villain anyone's ever run into. The villain's name is Shane, and he was like power behind the throne. But the problem was he kept escaping. His entire idea was he always got away and left them to clean up the messes he made, and forced them to start thinking outside the box to actually trap him so he couldn't escape. And that's what that felt like, that entire campaign. It's like, okay, we're going to rush into this city, and crap, he's already left. We're going to rush into this fort. Oh, crap, he's already left. And I thought that was really intriguing. I was kind of like, come on. And then when you finally get him, it's just so cathartic.
I've noticed it's very cat and mouse.
I had been reading a lot of Civil War history, and there are portions of the Civil War, if you read Sherman's memoirs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The grindingness of the long chase, the exhaustion, the ugliness, and just the sheer, oh no, not again. We just can't stamp this out. We can't catch Lee, for instance. We can't catch this other Confederate commander. And eventually they're not going to win. But in the meantime, it just drags on and on and on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I recently watched the Ken Burns Civil War series. So, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about there. Well, that takes us through most of Sheep Farmer's Daughter. Let's talk about... Now, this is a book, I don't think, Lauren, you're not into this one yet.
No, there's one other really important scene in Sheep Farmer's Daughter. It's one of the last scenes, I believe. Well, I read the omnibus edition, so I'm not sure where stuff falls exactly in terms of books, but I think it's one of the last ones. It is where Paksenarrion and the Duke actually kind of butt heads for the first time.
Oh, that's right.
It's what to do with him once they've caught him.
Yeah. She for the first time questions her commander's judgment.
And she takes a strong moral stand. Again, tying it back to tabletop gaming, it's basically the what do we do with these baby goblins question. And she answers it in a brilliant way. We have a prisoner that we know is evil, that's guilty of these crimes. Should we execute him? And she says no and gives very compelling reasons for why not.
What she's actually saying no to is not killing him, but torturing him.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's in a war, it's, reasonable to kill the enemy, but to torture, bad.
The Duke wants to torture him because he tortured people in the company when he captured them at Dwarf Watch.
That's right.
And so the Duke wants to torture him. And Pax says no. And you're right, this is the first time that she has acted in any way that might be considered disloyal. She's had to grow past her initial naive loyalty. to develop a moral compass of her own. And it's still a very weak moral compass.
Sorry,
but it's there.
I apologize for laughing right now, but I'm just watching Lauren. Apparently, I found the exact scene in the book she's almost getting to because she's just like freaking out because now she knows how it ends.
No, I'm past that.
Oh, okay.
I'm where they've already seen. She's received the amulet of Gerd from, Cannon? I want to say her name is. And it's having a response to her, and she's been told to take it to one of the
Finn Paneer.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the first time that the Inklings of the Paladin powers go talk to the marshals.
Yeah. And I'm just like, so I've got that pretty set in my mind. I was like, okay, I know that's going to happen now, I think. But I try not to think too far ahead in the books. But now I'm getting ideas. Now I'm looking at the Kindle right now going, I want to pick it up. I want to pick it up. I want to pick it up. So.
Well, this moment is really interesting for me because, again, to tie it back to gaming, like, you don't, a lot of times when we make a character and play in a role-playing game, that character kind of feels like they've always been there, right? They've like, maybe I wasn't born a paladin, but I've kind of been a paladin for a really long time. And I like the fact that this book sort of gives you a different perspective on it. This book is like, no, but you may not be a paladin yet. You may just be thinking you might have that kind of potential. Or even if you are a paladin, you could have had all kinds of adventures before you even, picked up the mantle.
I'm going to go complete gamist on this. It really reminds me of a character that I played in a game that I didn't really we only did about 3 or 4 sessions of, so I didn't get to really explore it. But it was, the idea was this character started out a fighter, but was going to become a paladin. And that might be one of the reasons why I latched onto the series so hard when I read it. And this is the character I wanted to play. It never got a chance because the campaign didn't get off the grounds. But I will say that Paksenarrion is a hell of a lot better than any character I could have played. I'll tell you that right now.
Finding the correct contact lenses and the perfect frames for the fashionably nerdtastic can be a hassle in the big box stores, so that's why I use AC Lens. From the most fashionable frames and hard-to-find prescription contact lenses to the perfect contacts for your next cosplay, AC Lens has all the bases covered at your fingertips without the hassle of leaving the game table. Just go to gamerstavern.org/AC Lens, LENS. They have amazing offers, including up to $300 in savings for a year's supply of contact lenses, and with a 100% satisfaction guarantee, what's not to like? There is even a special deal for Gamers Tavern listeners, $5 off any contact lens order of $50 or more. They have everything you need to keep your eyes healthy and happy. So check out gamerstavern.org/AC Lens today for all your eye care needs.
And we're back with the Gamers Tavern, speaking with author Elizabeth Moon about her books, The Deed of Paksenarrion. And we just got done talking about the first in the trilogy, which is Sheep Farmer's Daughter. And now we're talking about Divided Allegiance. Now, this is the one I think I enjoyed, again, for some of the gaming linkage. We're introduced to a character called Arvid Semenson, who is a thief. And he's, very much that kind of archetypical, I think, in many ways,
thief.
The thief you think of when you look at the thief in the player's handbook. You know what I mean?
Although he insists he's a thief enforcer, he's not really a thief. Thieves are lower class than he is.
Of course.
I'm not a thief. I am a dexterity-based fighter that wears leather armor. Thank you very much. Because that's one thing that always bugged me is why would a thief run around saying they're a thief?
Yeah, well, Arvid doesn't, which is, he kind of, sort of does, but he kind of doesn't either. But again, it's really interesting. This character, of course, gets focused on again in the later novels as well, which is something I love. But when we're introduced to him in Divided Allegiance, he's very much a thief. And this is, again, still during time when Paksenarrion was sort of wandering around on her own. And I think Arvid is, again, one of those great characters, kind of showcases some of Paksenarrion's naivete in a way. He is a man of the world.
He is a sophisticate as far as he's concerned. And he loves going out in the country to these little small towns, showing off and trying to steal girls from the local yokels.
And they get involved in an adventure together, which, there's a couple of times in these novels where it feels very much like a quest, an adventure. It feels like something you would sit down at a table and play. The first, of course, being the elf barrow with Simeon. And then the second one being the adventure with Arvid to rescue the villagers from the is it a temple of Archaia?
Acria.
Acria. Okay, so I can't pronounce it.
Well, who could probably? I mean, there's probably a dozen ways to pronounce it, but that's how I pronounce it.
Right.
What's the old
he's
R.A.
helping with
Salvatore naming method? Mash your hand on the keyboard and hope you get enough vowels.
Nice. Elizabeth, would you agree with me? This kind of feels like a D&D type adventure where they go and rescue the villagers.
Yeah, it probably does. I needed something fairly small that would yield something that was plot relevant, but that was not a huge giant adventure because I had other stuff ahead for her.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it about a playable size, I think.
Yeah. This is also the first book where we get to see her training with the Paladins of Gerd, if I'm not mistaken. Or does that come in Othagol? No, this is Devedili. Okay, I'm correct.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, she is rewarded for the successes that she had in the town by being offered a chance to go and train as a knight.
Correct.
In Finpanir.
And this is where the thing with the ring comes in that we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, the first ring actually goes to the Kuagan in that village.
Yes, and
she admits to him that she has abused power by using it to train the horse, and that she's kept it secret, and so she gives it up to him.
That's right. It was a wonderful scene. That's actually the whole interplay with her and the Kuatgani is amazing, and I love that this actually plays in later with the understanding of religion, because we're told that, and this is again big spoiler, but we're told that she's going to be a paladin of Gerd, that her patron is Gerd, that, this is all about her and her relationship with the religion of Gerd, the Gerdsmen and then the Gerdish, the Granges, whatever you want to say about that. Of course, later on we learn that she's actually a paladin of the High Lord, which is interesting because this is where she's working with a different religion, one that's actually sort of antagonistic with the Gerdish
and
for the most part.
I actually had a different interpretation when I read the book. It wasn't to me that she was it was more, that she was a paladin of not a specific deity, but a paladin of just the entire embodiment of the ideals of a paladin.
Well, that may be true, but I mean the characters in the book are assuming that she's going to be Gerdish. That's what I'm
that is firmly in there. That she's going to train at the big temple of Gerd, but the idea of what she ends up becoming is more of a general, I'm just a really good, awesome person, and I have special powers because I'm so good and awesome. And not in a dismissive way of that. It's literally, she is that good and that awesome that she deserves these powers.
Well, they made an interesting change in Dungeons & Dragons where they allowed paladins to be representations of ideals in the later edition. And I always saw that specific change as one that I thought really was like, if you want to play as a type of Paksenarrion type paladin, this is a way to go, which I thought was neat. But yeah, the interplay with her and the Kuatgani where she gives up the ring, this is a thing that happens here. And then we get to possibly the most interesting bit of the book.
Before that, the interaction with the Kugan, it was just so amazing to me because it's the relationship between the two of them started off it started off slightly antagonistic in a way. And then it just evolved because she was just, it seemed like to me, she was just completely put off by his druidic otherworldliness and then slowly start to see the person behind all the stuff. And that was just a really great slow burn kind of character development moment for me where she realizes that, and I think it was because of her time with the elves that she realized, and again, we're skipping ahead a lot, but that was one of those moments where she starts to realize it's not what someone says, it's what they do and who they are.
Yes, agreed.
And I agree too.
Yeah, I wonder if she's sitting here going, you're getting it wrong, you're getting it wrong.
Oh, no.
Because that is something I wanted to ask you about was our first introduction way back in Sheep Farmer's Daughter to the religion of Gerd is from a very zealous
recruit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the other recruits, and she is very, very, you need to worship Gerd. Gerd is awesome. You need to worship Gerd. Here's all about Gerd, and Gerd is great, and Gerd is good, and worship Gerd. And it's like really cloying, and you're just wanting to just say, seriously, cut it out.
Well, I always wondered about this too, because I know that Elizabeth spent a lot of her time in Texas.
Mhm.
So I'm curious if this has anything to do with sort of the religious makeup of that particular state. So
It has to do with the variety of religious behaviors that go in almost any religion. There are narrow-minded people in every religion, and there are more broad-minded people in every religion. So I was exposed to both of them down on the border in a variety of religions. Catholicism, Baptist, Methodist, Episcopalians. I could see this. I grew up with it. For that reason, I think, when I wanted to write about and include religions, and chose deliberately not to use Christianity, as some people have done, I wanted to show the range of behaviors that exist within one and how they work out in human relationships.
And the thing I love about that is the overzealous, I'm going to try, the evangelical GERD follower wasn't a bad person. They were just a little annoying and cloying about it. They were a good person, but
yeah. They're that guy who always tries to get you.
As someone who grew up in Southeast Texas himself, I have run into that person a lot myself. So
yeah, I think most of us have. And I think most of us have also run into people who are much more relaxed about it. It doesn't mean that they don't have strong beliefs, but they aren't trying to force them on everybody else.
Exactly.
We see a lot of those examples in the books as well, of course.
And I just wonder, was there a reason behind the choice to put I'm using cloying and annoying one right up front, and then later on show us the examples of the more, we're not all evangelical like that. We follow him and try to lead by example and hope other people will see the light.
It gives Paksenarrion doubts and it lets her sort of hesitate when offered, this thing that other people are like, well, of course you should do it. That's what I thought is sort of a foundation for that.
Her very independence that led her to leave home makes her resist being pushed unless it's something that she chooses. Like, she didn't mind being pushed by her sergeant, but she was not going to be pushed by somebody about anything else. So putting that early showed that she was not going to be easily pushed around. She was not going to be an easy convert. She was going to have doubts. She was going to have resistance. Once she met Canna, and Canna was not like that, she began to think less harshly of the Gerdish religion. But she still wasn't ready to commit to anything for quite a long time.
Now, the part I wanted to talk about, though, is in Divided Allegiance, is actually the part where she is cursed, where Paksenarrion is cursed and she becomes a coward. And it's in some ways it's tough to read because you love this character. You really come to know this character and want to root for her. She is the protagonist. And it's hard to see her go through something like this. But at the same time, it's fascinating because you get to see through her eyes how other people respond to that.
I thought it was a great portrayal of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Well, that's one way to look at it too. Yeah, is PTSD. But specifically, it made her very fearful. And the reason for this, and I love this. I love the fact that it builds up to this big reveal. The reason for this is because one of the things that paladins do is they deal with, they are resistant to fear. They kind of exemplify courage. And the way that it's explained is that Paksenarrion, in order to become that exemplar of what courage is, she had to know and understand what fear is, what it's like to be fearful, what it's like to be a coward. Because without that, I mean, this kind of goes back to that, like in the movie, the Captain America movie, we chose a weak man because he would understand the value of strength, right? And with
always know how to protect who needs protecting.
Yeah, she gets that understanding of what makes people fearful, and it really enhances that whole paladins are the courageous ones bit. And I loved it. It was fantastic for me. It was the most memorable thing from Divided Allegiance, in my opinion, was that series of events. And of course, one of the best parts is, of course, she gets to revisit the Quatgani during this period.
Well, I thought that was the beginning of
the
Oath of Gold.
That's Oath of Gold. Yeah.
Oath of Gold.
Listen, I'm a host. I'm trying to segue. All right.
So Divided Allegiance was the downer ending for the
segue.
Divided Allegiance was the Empire Strikes Back ending, and then we go into Oath of Gold.
Right, which is where my segue was leading us to.
And you would not believe how many letters and phone calls I got when the books first came out as 3 separate books.
Oh, God.
Yes. And people were stuck at the end of the second one. They were not happy readers. They were not happy readers at all. But I had written the thing all as one, and I had to cut it up because, a many thousand-page book not going to get published if it's your first novel. Only people who have been many times published can get away with that, and I'm not one of them even. But I had to find a place to break it, and that's the only place within about 150 pages on either side of it that you could break it.
I thought it was the perfect spot to end, because again, it gives that trilogy feel to it. It's the first one is her finding her independence. The second one is her kind of exploring that independence, but and learning the consequences of having to make her own choices. And then the end result is the almost worst case scenario for that. And then the third book is all about climbing back out of it and the redemption thereof.
Well, I mean, I never saw Pax as a redemption story. I mean, she never really did anything that we needed to see her be redeemed for.
Redemption's the wrong word,
but it is a really interesting arc of a character that does change and ends up in a different place at the end of each book than where she started, which is there's many other authors of whom I could name where that is not true of their main characters. So yes, but Oath of Gold. So let's talk about Oath of Gold. Now this is the climax. It's the climactic volume, you might say, of the trilogy. And this is where we talk about the PTSD, and she gets to sort of she gets to revisit the Quagani. And it's wrong to say that she's cured. It's more to say that the curse is lifted and she learns, that's where she kind of gains a new understanding of herself, I would say.
I thought it was very reminiscent of, and again, this is why PTSD is strong in my head, is I've had mild PTSD from some of the hurricane that came through. So that's where maybe that's me impressing on the character, something that's not there, but that ends,
if only we had the author here to ask.
Well, I know, but I'm giving my unbiased opinion first before she can come and say, oh, no, you're completely wrong. I don't know where you got that from. But I thought that, that and the sessions with the Kukan were basically, it reminded me a lot of therapy. It was very, very psychology based, almost modern style therapy. Like you talk through everything, a little bit Freudian Jungian in the terms of how it was handled. And basically it was, you're sitting in the room while she's laying on the couch.
Tell me about your mother.
Exactly.
Not quite. I don't know.
Not quite that Freudian, but
no, I didn't see it. Her relationship with the Quagani, I didn't see as a doctor-patient. This is where I think we get to see the rewards of her actions earlier, where she had been honest and clear and, gained a new friend. And again, this is, about her understanding of the religion as well, of understanding that they offer different things than the Guardsmen do, which is, again, I feel it's important from a world building standpoint as well as character one.
So, Miss Moon, do you want to sit here and tell me how completely and utterly wrong I am? Or?
No, I'm not going to say that. At the time, I didn't know as much about PTSD as I learned later. Realize I wrote this in the early 80s, and the topic of PTSD was not widely known or talked about or written about at that time. There's a therapeutic thing to it. The Kuakgani are nature-based healers. That's their primary duty, is to sustain healthy life. So when they find somebody who is suicidal, who they know and saw potential in, they're going to try to intervene and help that person heal. But the healing has to come from inside. As he's pointed out for some of the other creatures that he talks to her about, they each have their own nature. And he's not going to make somebody different from what they really are.
Which is a counterpoint to her training with the Marshal General.
Yes.
Where that was kind of where they were going with that, is they were turning her into someone else.
Yes. And when they did the psychic surgery, let's say, that tried to remove the evil and let her heal, and she didn't heal, They were trying to make her into the Guardsman, the perfect Guardsman type of person. And it didn't work. It didn't work in the early training, and it didn't work in the cure, although it did remove what nothing else could probably have removed, which was that bitterness, that anger that had been implanted in her during her captivity.
So it's kind of like treating the body, but not treating the mind or the spirit or whatever you want to call it.
They were trying to treat, I think, the mind and spirit, but they didn't get the whole package, and they did damage. And she knew they might do damage, but partly her fear of the damage, her incorrect belief that to be brave you have to feel brave, which was part of her. She'd always been a very bold person, and so she thought, if I don't feel brave, if I feel scared, then it means I've lost all my courage. And to the Kuak-Gan, of course, courage is part of what keeps you alive. It is a life force.
Fear is what keeps you alive, too.
There are times that fear keeps you alive, yeah. Not going where you shouldn't go. But what he's telling her is that everything that is alive has a measure of courage in the life force, because it's very easy to die. It's really fantastically easy to jump off a cliff or shoot yourself or stab yourself. What's hard is to keep going.
I always saw that as you know, as what you're saying, but I also, to me, the thing I always like to take away from that was that, you know, courage isn't not being fearless. Courage is what you do in spite of being afraid.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what I thought was the really great thing out of that.
And I also thought the big split between what the Guardsmen were trying to do to make Pax better, versus what the
Kuak-Gan.
Sorry? What was
Kuak-Gan.
Kuak-Gan. Okay. Versus what the Kuak-Gan were doing, it was very much the idea of how to teach someone, two different schools. One is to tell someone what to do. The other one is to show them what to do. The Kuak-Gan was very much on the show side of things. It wasn't, okay, we've now gotten you to the point where you can kind of function. You're able to go to the tavern and have dinner. Now let's put you with these elf rangers for a while and let you help them out and let them show you their way. Or let's go to, versus the Guardsmen, which is, okay, this is what you need to do in order to get better. You have to do this, and this, and you have to.
Yeah.
Very good.
Oh, okay. I got the gold star. Awesome.
You totally do. Now, we have not a whole lot of time left, so I want to kind of skip to just the end bit of Oath of Gold before we get into the last parts. Daryl, do you or Lauren have anything else you want to jump into on Oath of Gold before I go there? Or?
She hasn't gotten that far yet.
I haven't gotten that far. Like I said, I'm just sitting here, like, looking at the Kindle going, I'll read it in a minute.
Well, the next part is going to be kind of hard to talk about without spoiling massively. So.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate, this is probably one of the ones we were talking about earlier when we mentioned, before the broadcast, I brought up trigger warnings.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've got to say, though, that the way this whole thing was handled, I think, brilliantly. So I thought it was absolutely amazing the entire thing through. So I'm going to put that up forward. If you are someone who is sensitive to things like torture or violence, this is the point of the podcast where we want to skip a few minutes and go forward.
It's going to be hard to hear about this.
Yeah. But it's one of the defining moments for the character, in my opinion.
Well, it is. It's a huge... Okay, so we're talking about the ending of Oath of Gold. There is this character, Paksenarrion, who we've discussed how much we love and how much we've enjoyed watching her change and overcome these horrible things that have happened to her and overcome and learn new things.
And at this point, she has become a full-fledged paladin. She, shining armor and power and everything.
Well, she has.
She has, but
yeah, it's fair to say I call her a proto-paladin at this point. She's
a low-level fighter paladin at this point.
However you want to put it is fine. But I don't think she's quite taking that final step, which is kind of what this is about. But
yeah,
Elizabeth can certainly
the final test.
If we're wrong. But what happens is she gets involved with Arvid, and there's a thing about the Archaeans, the servants of this evil goddess, and they end up capturing Paksenarrion. And it's not just, it's one of those scenes where, again, in many other books, there's a lot of lead up that kind of makes you imagine that someone will ride in and save her at the last moment. Only that doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
The servants of this evil goddess have been getting pissed about the things that Paksenarrion's been doing, and they take it out on her. They torture her.
And I do want to say one thing about this point. I think it's one of my favorite things is the whole thing about Paksenarrion, and forgive me if I'm kind of stepping this, I'm kind of rewording what you said earlier, Elizabeth, but it's a concept in gaming called lawful stupid, which is you're playing a lawful good character to almost a cartoonish perspective and being stupid in order to try to fit into that. And at this point in time, I think is when the bad guys go into what's called chaotic stupid or evil stupid, where they are given the choice between we can go intercept the king, which is our entire goal, or we can torture this paladin for a couple of days. Hey, let's torture the paladin for a couple of days.
Well, it makes sense. It makes sense in the context of the thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, but it makes total sense that they would do this. It's one of those, we really should do this other thing, but no, we need to do this thing to be ourselves.
The church of this particular evil goddess, it has to do with scheming and personal advancement, and there's a very good reason for them to have chosen to debauch themselves with their captive.
Exactly.
Than to go accomplish an actual goal, because the church of this evil goddess, and again, Elizabeth can step in here if we're completely off base, but to me, it always seemed like they were more about doing things that they enjoy and less about actually accomplishing tasks. You know what I mean?
They were also trying to get converts too. I think they had people.
This was supposed to be an example. This was like look, we have captured one of the champions of the enemy. We're going to show you what happens when you are a champion of the enemy. And it's hard to read, man. I mean, I want to stress just to the listeners, this is a dark chapter. Elizabeth she doesn't get explicit, but she doesn't hold back on telling you what's happening. Pax is violated.
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to use the R word. Rape is involved, but at this point in time, that's actually one of the lesser evils that they put her through. Yeah.
Well, it's just, I was going to say, they violate her just about every way you can.
Yeah.
And it's hard to read. Now, the thing about this scene, and some listeners may be questioning, why are you lingering on this thing if it's so horrible? It's a catalyst for change. And it's a catalyst for change, not just for Paksenarrion, but it changes Arvid Simonson, this thief that she had been working with. This is the moment where he decides he is no longer the man he was, because he sees her go through this. And he, realizes that he is in some way responsible for this. It changes
the people watching.
It changes the church of this evil goddess, because they also start to question.
Because again, this was a lot of this was theater. It was put on in an arena with grandstands, and they were bringing people in. It's like, watch us break this person. And she's just sitting there. It's like, Gerd will punish you, but be merciful after every single torture she goes through. Yeah. And they start, and it's like,
it starts to actually
it snowballs, and everyone's just like, oh God, what the hell is wrong with us?
Because of the way that Pax endures, it changes the whole character and tone.
And the important thing is,
it
isn't like she's just sitting back and doing it. She gave her word, and she is keeping her word.
She has to.
She has to. She vowed to, was it 3 days and nights, I think?
Yeah, she had to submit to whatever they wanted for 3 days and nights in order to let these other people live and get free.
And it was to buy time for the rightful heir to get and claim his throne. And again, Elizabeth, you can jump in any time. We're rambling right now because this is powerful.
Let's pause and ask her right now. Like, how far afield have we wandered on this?
Only a little afield. I will say that this was the hardest thing to write. I didn't want to write it. I wanted to just say, oh, by the way, they tortured her for several days and then everything was okay. But that obviously is a cop-out. Probably about the third draft of it, I sent to Judy Tarr and asked her to read it. And she said, it's a cop-out. You can't do it this way. Either take it out or rewrite it. And I thought, I'm going to have to go through every single bit of this, aren't I? And I did. And I did have to. I had to sit there and be in point of view as I wrote it, which was not fun. On the other hand, it was what made it work when I figured out how she actually thought about it. Now, how she felt about it, of course, was a great deal of pain, but how she actually thought about it, how she actually negotiated within herself how to react and how it would work. She didn't know if she was going to live or die. She actually expected to die. And she was okay with that by that time. But she didn't, obviously. Since there's more books that have her in them.
Yeah, well, the catalyst for change, I mean, it's not, we can make the listeners maybe a little happier by saying what happens in the end is she is okay.
Oh.
And that her body is essentially healed and she becomes a true paladin of the High Lord.
I thought that scene
very powerful.
And again, male, maybe different perspective, but it put the other scenes in perspective. She endured, and then she seemed to die, and they claimed triumph, and everyone around is like, really, nope. This was your triumph? And then that is when the paladin comes out, heals everything. Yep. It's like, oh, you thought you won. Well, screw you.
Well, this is, I mean, it gives meaning to this horrible scene.
I know.
Because it becomes a catalyst for change, and it becomes clear that this was
crossing the threshold.
Way for the gods. Yeah, it was a way for also the gods to kind of make it clear that this church had overstepped.
And that there was such a thing as something better.
Justice. Yeah.
There is justice. There is something better. It's not easy. There is no cheap grace.
Right.
But there is grace. And that was what I was trying for. As a matter of fact, I had to write 2 other stories that were not in the book because they would have unbalanced the book to satisfy myself after writing the horrible torture scene and even the healing scene. I had to write the story of the little boy.
Right.
That was beaten. And I had to write this part of the story of Paladin that I hadn't written. Now, that has never been published. The little boy's story has been published. But I had to really understand Paladin. Why was she so bitter? Why was she so determined that even after Pax had gone through the torture, that she wanted to kill her and destroy her body? That made no sense to me initially. Now it does. But that's not a story that I will ever publish.
Okay.
It's too dark for me. After what I've written, you may wonder that I can say that about anything, but I can.
Well, the thing about this final scene, and I think that this is really the last bit I want to talk about it really, is just it's that tunnel you go through to emerge on the other side stronger. It's the final challenge that Pax goes through before she becomes what she had always been intended to be, which is a hero, which is a champion of the ideals that she believed in.
And that was the dream she had when she left home, but she had no idea what it was going to cost to get there.
I always wanted to see, just as a thing, because I have you on the show here and I'm a super fan, and I've read this book like a billion times. I really have to say, I've always wanted to sort of be a fly on the wall in the Three Firs when her sword comes back. And see what happens there. I always wanted to sort of see the family react, or see maybe, one of her sisters be inspired or something along those lines. I don't know. I've always wanted to see that. I know you may not ever write it. It's fine, but
I've tried to write it. I have
really?
tried to write it because I wanted to see it. And the only way I could see things is to write them.
Okay.
So I have tried. I know that the person who brings it is not wearing Girdish blue, but is wearing white. I don't know the significance of that for sure. But I know that as he's coming up the hill actually the whole trail up from Rocky Ford into Three Firs, people start looking because here's this person on a gray horse, dressed in white, with a couple of swords. I mean, he's got his own sword, and then he's got her sword. And goes on through Three Firs, and people start following. So when they get up to Pax's house,
there's like crowd.
There's a little, well, not a big crowd because Three Firs is a very tiny village.
But still, it's like that's got to be the most exciting thing that's happened there for a while.
Yeah.
Aside from harvest season, it's like, what the hell is this guy doing here?
A stranger.
Let's follow him and find out what he's doing.
Yeah. Going up there, about those people. They've heard a few things about Pax, but they haven't heard the whole story. So he gets up there, and the last thing that I can see, quote unquote, air quotes, is that her father comes out of the house. That's it.
Okay.
Her father's standing there. The guy is on the horse.
Yeah.
This one sword belted at his side, and the other one he's got now in his hands. What the heck is that all about? Why won't you let me write the rest of it? I want to write the rest of it.
If you do, I just want to tell you, I would be the first guy, and you would make me, and probably a ton of fans supremely
Second.
happy. Okay, so there you go. You had two people in line already for that book.
Well, if I do get it written, it will probably go into one of the PAX story ebooks. The first one's out now.
So, is that the
Deeds of Honor?
Deeds of Honor. I have not read that one yet either, actually. So that's
a
a
new
one.
PAX story. I've got to track that down.
Yeah.
Because I gotta say,
Okay.
the only reason why the rest of the books have kind of gone to I'll get to those in just a moment, is they didn't focus on Paksenarrion, and knowing there's another story that focuses on Paksenarrion, clomp, I want that. Give me now.
Well,
that would almost jump a Jim Butcher novel for me, and to say that is the highest praise I have to give, because I am the biggest Jim Butcher fanboy ever.
Yes. They're not all PAX stories. They are PAX World stories. Mostly connected to the new group of books, not entirely.
Which I think Daryl should read those too, anyway.
Oh, but they are definitely on my list. It's one of those I just haven't had time. It was only about 3 or 4 months ago. And by the way, if you're wanting one of those examples where it's maybe Ross is looking with rose-tinted lenses is something he read when he was a youth and they were so awesome then. No, I read these like a couple of months ago when I'm in my 30s, and these books are still that amazing. So
That is so nice of you.
This is not just I read something when I was a kid and I'm really in love with it. But no, these books are amazing.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, though, is I did read them 23 years ago. So
yeah, and Ross is actually the one who turned me on to him. He talked about him on the show, and I'm like, what is this thing? And I researched, I'm like, okay, I must read this thing. And I started reading, and then 2 days later and about 3 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
That is so flattering. It makes a writer very, very happy to know that they have cost somebody sleep.
Oh,
Well, Daryl has some things he wants to talk about with regards to this trilogy, specifically about its relationship to gaming. I think it's obvious that these are some great stories that have been inspired by gaming, which I love that. I love that our hobby that we all enjoy so much. Maybe not so much anymore for Elizabeth, but the games that we've all at least tried and enjoyed at certain points in our life become an inspiration for fantastic stories like this.
And the main one I'm wanting to talk about is one of my favorite adventure modules of all time, which is T1, the first section of the Temple of Elemental Evil called The Village of Hamlet, which, if you read Divided Allegiance, it seems very inspired by that module. And I was kind of wanting to get your input on that. How that came about and why you chose that for your inspiration. Because it's...
Well, maybe she did, maybe she didn't. Maybe it's parallel development.
I know, but
Give me the name of that module again.
Village of Hamlet.
Of
Hamlet.
Hommlet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is one that my husband DM'd.
So that's why it seems familiar to you.
Yeah. Now, I made changes to it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, nobody's accusing you of copying it directly.
No, that's okay. I'm not trying to be snarky about it. But I made some changes to it because of my history degree, when I'd studied ancient medieval history primarily, there were things that I thought needed to be in a village like that weren't there. And there were things that I thought weren't right, for historically speaking. So I squished things around some.
And I've got to say,
yeah,
I'm a huge fan of that, to the point where I went through and did a line-by-line edit to convert it to the new edition of D&D. And even I didn't catch that it was the Village of Hamlet adventure in the Moat House until I was reading online after I read the books. It's like, oh, hey, by the way, TV Trope says this is the Village of Hamlet. I'm like, wait, what? Huh? Oh my God. So when I say, I'm saying inspired by specifically.
Yeah, he had done a couple of adventures in that area, DM'd a couple of them that he made up. That one of them in particular, and I can't of course, now. It's a few years in between. I can't remember all the details of why I said, I think I want to use that in the book.
Yeah, there's a TV tropes page. It's just fantastic.
Yep.
It filled the need for the experience I wanted her to have. She needed certain experiences before she got to Fin Panir to set her up for that, so that she was thinking she was even further along, more experienced than she was. She stayed naive about as long as you probably can, but then I was a fairly naive person for years. So, and people would kid me about it, and I thought, okay, I guess you can just not notice things.
I'm 35 and I still feel pretty naive at times.
By the way, that overzealous character we were talking about earlier, that's Effa.
Ah,
that's her name.
Yes, that's right. She dies.
Yes, she does.
That was not as any kind of punishment for being overzealous. It was the fact that she was just that little bit slower than some of the others.
Okay, so Daryl, you wanted to talk about the Village Hamlet. Mm-hmm. What are some other things that are gaming-wise that come out of or are related to the Deed of Paksenarrion?
Like I said, there are a couple of novels and TV shows that I always use as examples to my players when they're going into a game. For example, Shadowrun, I always show new Shadowrun players the TV show Leverage. When it comes to rogues, I almost always go to the Gentleman Bastard series of books.
Yeah. Scott Lynch.
Yep. And there is nothing better for paladins, in my opinion, than the Deed of Paksenarrion.
Lawful good done right.
Exactly. It is. That's.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't say anything more. It is just perfect for what a paladin should be.
Together we have something like 70 years of role-playing game experience under our belt. So, when we say that the authoritative D&D paladin done right is Paksenarrion, I think that's pretty. I think that's something you could put on your website and be, and be real with.
Thank you.
Yeah, every time she takes charge in a situation, it's not, "Hi, I'm Deadly Do-Right, and I'm here to be perfect and good, and everything I say is law, and if you don't do what I say, then I'm going to smite you." No, it is, this is what you should do because it's the right thing to do, and here's why it's the right thing to do. It brings out that charisma aspect of the things. She leads by example. Absolutely. So much in the books. And
could I toss in a little bit about something I just remembered? I should have said it earlier. Mm-hmm. A couple of the things that I learned from gaming, starting with the strategy games I played with my husband years and years back, and also from the D&D experience, is how to randomize across a population for results. For instance, we commented that Effa died. I've forgotten how many people. I'd written them all down in Pax's recruit cohort. And many of them were just minor characters.
Did you roll dice for them?
Yes. I rolled dice for them. For every single one of them.
That is how it's done. That is how it's done.
Now, I started with the knowledge of the percentage of recruits that would normally die in war in that kind of technological setup. That's from the history books. I was going to lose, I think it was 31% or something like that. And so I figured out the percentages and I rolled dice for them. And on some of the minor engagements, the little battles and ambushes and things like that, I would roll dice for each of those to see how many I lost in each one and who it was. And there are few people were protected up to a point, but there were drop-off points through the book when they were no longer protected from the dice roll.
Did anyone surprise you with their survivability?
I'm not sure I remember. Okay. But yes, I mean, everyone that survived to the end was kind of a surprise because they could have gone at any moment. Now, I quit doing that after a while. When you start out writing a fantasy, any novel, and you like your characters and you have interesting characters you've made up and you've put time into giving them backgrounds and histories and all that stuff, you don't like to see them die. Or I don't.
No, I can see that.
I don't want to kill them off. But some of them have to go. How do you make yourself, and sometimes they have to lose a battle or they have to lose an engagement. It has to go wrong. They're trying something and it fails. How do you keep yourself honest? The best way to keep yourself honest is to figure out what are the odds of success and loss and randomize it. Roll the stupid dice.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm sorry, I'm still giddy over the fact you actually rolled dice.
That's great. We do enjoy that. Now, we're running a little short on time, so I just want to run through. No, you're fine. I just want to run through a few quick questions, and then we're going to get into our final thoughts. Daryl has this question in the show notes here. I've got to ask it. What exactly is Sib?
Sib is a drink, very much like the South American one that I can't think of the name of right now, where you take a bunch of twigs of a holly-related plant and some other herbs, and you stick them in a cup and you pour hot water over it.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then you put in a little, like a straw thing, and you drink out of that. At the moment, I'm sorry, I'm totally blanking on what this is. It's fairly common in like Argentina and Uruguay and Paraguay.
Because I always thought it was like chicory or something like that.
Yeah, it was actually listed. No, it's actually listed in the TV Tropes page as one of the uncoffees, which is the coffee drink that isn't coffee because coffee wasn't available at that time period. So that's why
it's a stimulant. It's a stimulant drink, but was really based on the South American one, and which has more twigs, stick-like little things, instead of being made from berries.
Now, another question I have for you is, with the success of like the Game of Thrones television show, has there been interest in making Dita Paksenarrion into a television or a movie?
It's been optioned once or twice, but it's never gone anywhere. I think partly because they don't. I think it may be a gender thing. It may be that George got there first.
Or it could be like the Wheel of Time
took up
thing.
Most of the market for it. I don't know.
Did you guys hear about the Wheel of Time?
Oh, let's not get into that.
The pilot that aired at 1:30 in the morning.
Oh Lord, that pilot! Yeah, it was made specifically just so they could keep the rights.
Yeah, that was.
It's a dick move. That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, so you mentioned a polearm story earlier on.
Yes.
I had never, of course, done any fighting with polearms. I'd done some fencing and handled firearms, things like that, but not polearms. So in order to figure out what would happen if you had a troop of recruits and polearms, I cut down some of the giant those cane reeds, that you make cane poles out of, and recruited some kids that used to live here in the neighborhood.
Oh my God.
Who, of course, thought it was great fun to play soldier. And we went out and started trying to drill in the horse lot. And everything that happens to the recruits while they're first learning to use polearms is something that happened to this.
Oh, I would have loved to have seen a video.
No. There's no pictures.
Oh, no.
Hey, I was busy being the drill sergeant. There was no time to take pictures.
Oh.
That's awesome though. That's amazing.
That is funny.
200,000 YouTube views minimum.
Daryl, if you got something else, I'm going to jump into final thoughts.
Well, there's one other thing. We've talked a lot about the historical events and a lot of the cultural things that have come up. There's kind of the obvious. Luop's name was. The theory is, spelled backwards as Paul, as in the apostle, but. Other than that, were there any inspiration for the various naming types that you came up with? You talked about this a little bit.
Actually, Luap's name was Luap because I was looking for a name that had an ooah sound in the middle. It didn't occur to me that it was Paul spelled backwards until somebody pointed it out.
So, yes, I get to go and edit TV tropes after this episode's done.
I wanted, I thought of Tuon, I thought of Puap, I thought of all sorts of things, and then I came up with Luap, and I thought, oh, that's not a real word in any language that I know of, so I'll use that. Of course, if I had thought about it and spelled it backwards, I would have said, oh, no.
But about the other cultures and all the names, because the names really ring true. It's one of those, there is a trope that's called only one Steve limit, where only one character can be named this. And aside from the main characters, there are a lot of ancillary characters that have the same name as other ones. But what was it that inspired you to go with, for example, in the North, the last names are all based on familial first names. Was there anything that kind of inspired that? Or across the board with the names?
Probably Norway and Iceland, where they used to be.
Well, yeah. For that one specifically, but I meant for like were there any other cultural influences you drew on or historical events that inspired the books?
Oh, heavens, yes. Let's see. For instance, Signava's nickname of Honeycat. There was a famous guy in Italian history, I think it's about the 13th century. He was a warlord, a condottiere, and ended up becoming a duke. And his nickname was Honeycat in Italian. So when they did the Italian edition of it, they had to change Honeycat to something else because everybody would have thought, oh, she's talking about him. That's Gattamelata, if you look it up in history. I can't, of course, at this moment because I'm brain dead. I will
link in the show notes.
I need to do a really quick correction too. When we were talking earlier about the end of Oath of Gold, I didn't want to give the listeners I think I was under the mistaken impression it was the followers of Achira. It was actually the followers of Liart. Different, yes. Two different evil gods. So just to be clear, it was the Liart church.
Yeah, Achara was. Lord. Yeah, Achara was always much more was on the behind the scenes kind of cowardice. Web weaving kind of stuff, and the other one was a little bit more blunt in their
yeehaw evil.
Yeah,
they were yeehaw evil. Yay evil! We're so evil. We're going to choose to torture the paladin rather than go after the king. That's the thing. So sorry, just to be clear, that was a thing I messed up. Let's talk to Lauren first.
All right,
Lauren, what are your final thoughts on the Deed of Paksenarrion?
I cannot wait to finish this series and start reading all of the little other extra books in it. I've actually been surfing online while we've been talking, trying to find all the other books on Amazon.
Yeah, I keep seeing her with her eyes darting toward the Kindle that's sitting on the table this entire conversation.
I'm just like, no, because if I start reading it, then I'll completely tune everybody and everything else out, and I'll totally miss something. So,
for the record, to my employers, about November, I am so sorry I was inattentive at work for that day. I was completely sucked in to this entire world. This is, hands down, the best interpretation of a paladin I've ever seen. It is one of the greatest backstories I've ever seen for a character and their development and how they become the PC we all knew they should be, except for that's not the point, is the backstory. It's the road traveled more than the destination that's important. And every single step along the way gives you insight into the mentality of someone who would actually choose this path for themselves. And it is just so brilliantly written. It sucks you in so well. You feel every emotional punch through the entire thing, from the very beginning to her as a farm girl wanting to run away from a marriage, and her cousin happened to tell her, sign on with a mercenary unit, and she runs to town, literally just runs to town away from her father and her family to join this thing, all the way up until the very end where she's leading a campaign against the people who are traitorously trying to stop the king from taking his rightful throne. And it is so amazing, so great, so brilliantly written, and it sucks you in for every moment. You feel I'm repeating myself now. I'm rambling. Yeah, it is just so.
Can I get back in on the conversation?
Sorry, I stepped on your toes there, Lauren.
But in most of my campaigns that I've played, as far as like D&D and Pathfinder, I'm always playing like the half-elf ranger and stuff like that. I'm definitely going for the female paladin next time, because I've always seen the male paladins and I would get laughed at for the female paladins, and I'm just like, this time I'm going to play a female paladin, because now I know it can be done, and it can be done in a very awesome way, and I'm going to give the guys a run for their money.
Hell yeah, you are. That's awesome. As for me, as I said, I read this right as I graduated high school in 1992. And as I said, to me, it's a very important book because the Deed of Paksenarrion is the first time I think I saw a character that I felt was very real. You know, I talked about this earlier with Elizabeth's characters. They have families that have issues, they have flaws, and they have doubts, and they overcome them. And it made me really care about the characters, and it started me really trying to understand more about the craft of writing a story like this. of course, obviously, because I'm a gamer, it has special significance because of its origins, and it has significance because of, as Daryl says, it's the archetypical. This is how you play a paladin. But beyond that, beyond just those niche things, I think it's one of the classic fantasy novels for a reason, and it's absolutely deserves a place on the shelf of anybody who is a fantasy fan, because it is an epic tale that starts out very small and is told in very small stories that leads to a crowning moment of awesome for the character that has rarely been rivaled.
Yeah, there are 3 books I will throw out immediately or 3 series I will throw out immediately for people who are wanting to know what the fantasy genre is all about when it relates to gaming. Number 1 is Lord of the Rings, kind of defined the genre. Number 2 is Gentlemen Bastards, because I love it so much, because it is the quintessential rogue, and that's one of my favorite character classes to play. And number 3, in a very, very close number 3, is, without a doubt, the Deed of Paksenarrion. Because it takes a class that I never really played that much and just makes me want to jump in and play. Okay, this is how you do it. And it adds so much to the genre, in my opinion.
I'm going to feel a little weird asking Elizabeth for her final thoughts, because this is, she's still writing it. But maybe her final thoughts on the original trilogy, if she wants to share them with us.
Final thoughts on the original trilogy is that I was very, very sad when Pax rode away at the end of it, and I have been trying to make her come back and be a point of view character again.
Woo!
However,
Please.
she has refused. This is like 25 years she has refused. I'm not sure it's ever going to happen. I could still write in the universe. She could still be there as a non-point of view character. But from her point of view, her story, her arc from the raw farm girl to the paladin, that's what counts to her. That's what she thinks is important to be told.
I can get behind that, actually.
So you would say that the actual journey of the deed of Paksenarrion is more important than anything that came after?
To her.
To her.
And she won't come in. I mean, my characters do this to me. She will not come back to me in that way. And I am not going to fake her. If she comes back, I'll write her. If she doesn't come back, I'm not going to fake her. She's too important to me to fake. But I've had a lot of fun with the others.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that as a writer myself, I've learned that trying to get your characters to force them to do things is kind of like herding cats.
Yeah,
So,
it can be.
They turn plastic on you.
Yeah.
The barkeep has given us the eye, and the Imperial Guard may be coming by shortly to shut us
Whoops.
down. So I want to ask really quick, Elizabeth, can you tell the listeners about where they can find out more about you and what your latest thing is that they should be looking for on bookshelves?
Where they can find out more about me, my main website, elizabethmoon.com. For these books, the Pax World website at paxworld.com. What's coming next, I'm going back into Vada's world to write another Vada book.
Yay!
But there is also an ebook out called Deeds of Honor that has a number of stories from Pax World in it, although they are not Paksenarrion stories.
Fantastic.
And I have had a lot of fun here.
Well, we, on behalf of all three of us, Lauren, myself, and Daryl, we want to say how grateful we are to you for coming on board and telling us all about your books.
Well, I do want to mention one other thing that Elizabeth has done. It's a book called Speed of Dark, which won the Nebula Award. I know many of our listeners are autistic as well. That's the focus of this story. If it's something that either affects you or affects someone near you, definitely check this out. Even if it's not, check out this book. It is brilliantly written. It got less accolades than it deserved, in my opinion, and it got a lot of accolades. So,
well, I also just want to point out Trading in Danger, his first Vada book. It's fantastic. Go get it.
Thank you all so much.
You're very welcome.
All right. And that is going to close us out. So until next time, may all your hits be crits. 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 B crits, 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 B crits.